Thank you. I hope you can hear me. This is very science fiction-y. This is very cool. Okay, great. Thank you. So let's start. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Thank you, Republica, for having me. Especially thank you to Geraldine Debastian, who invited me to speak here and at Media Convention. I'm very excited. This is also my first time in Berlin, so all in all, a very good experience. I'm the founder and director of the Utopia Festival in Tel Aviv. We're first and foremost a film festival, but we're much more than that. We couple science fiction with a few items. We couple it with technological innovation that's inspired by science fiction. We couple it with philosophy and ethics of science as presented in science fiction. We couple it with media innovation and digital society that's part of science fiction culture. Now, I got this yesterday. This is the start of our 2014 branding. You're almost the first to see this. Our festival staff hadn't seen it yet. This year we're teaming up with the DLD Tel Aviv Innovation Festival, so it's going to be a whole week of digital and innovation and futurism and science fiction, so it's a big, big, big party. And you're all invited. Those are the dates. And if you like Republica, I have a good feeling that you'll like Utopia as well. Now, a little bit about me. I'm not big on Twitter. You're welcome to friend me on Facebook. I'm a space enthusiast. I love history. I love science. I studied a little bit physics, and I have a background in tech. I run a film festival, so I speak many dialects of geek language. But my first and foremost love is for science fiction. And from a much earlier age than 11, actually. With this audience, I'm sure I don't have to go into details about what science fiction is. We can all argue about the different boundaries between this genre and that genre, and whether that film or that piece of literature is science fiction or not. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here, and my goal is to have you walk out of this session as better equipped ambassadors of science fiction. For me, science fiction is a laboratory for big visionary ideas. And I'd like to emphasize one aspect of it, one important aspect, which is the intricate relationship science fiction has with science and technology. How science fiction is influenced by the science of its day, and in turn, it influences the science of tomorrow. And I've chosen to show one example to this intricate relationship that shows how these fields are meshed together, how they're inseparable, and how science fiction can actually force itself upon reality. And we have four prominent figures in this story. This is the first one. I'm sure we all know Albert Einstein's pivotal contribution to 20th century physics, but he also had a contribution to 20th century history and politics. And that's his letter to FDR, to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This letter, dated August 2nd, 1939, was sent by Einstein to FDR to warn him about the dangers of atomic power and asking him to delve into the possibilities, both wonderful and horrific, of the new sciences of the time. In this letter lies the Manhattan Project and the atomic era. And my argument to you is that this letter originates in science fiction, and I'd like to tell you how. And to do that, we must travel back in time, as one can do in science fiction, to 1903 and meet this guy. This is Frederick Soddy. He's a young scientist. He's 26 years old, and he's working at McGill University in Canada with a few of his colleagues about one of the great mysteries of his time, radioactivity. And they research the decay of radium, and they find out something incredible. They find out that a minute quantity of matter holds within it a vast amount of latent energy. And now, this claim is now common knowledge. It's probably one of the most well-known scientific equations, and it's been made famous by one, Albert Einstein. But Einstein didn't work alone, and understanding this involved the work of many scientists, and pivotal to that understanding was the work of Soddy and his publication of 1903. Now, back to Soddy. If he were alive today, he probably would have been talking at Republica as well as Utopia, because he wasn't just a scientist involved with science. He was very much involved with the history and philosophy of science. He was an advocate for the political and social implications of scientific research, and we would also call him a science communicator. He was very much involved with the public awareness, understanding, and support of scientific procedure and of science. And that means he gave a lot of talks. These are in Glasgow in 1908. And in 1909, he collects his talks to a book about the marvels of the new sciences, of the physics and chemistry of the time. And not just about the physics itself, but what they mean towards our understanding of the universe. The book is called The Interpretation of Radium, 1909. And now enters the third prominent person in our story, which is the visionary author H.G. Wells. He was already a celebrity of the time in 1909. He achieved celebrity status with his 3 first books. In 1895, he wrote The Time Machine. In 1896, he wrote The Island of Dr. Moreau. And in 1898, The War of the Worlds. He brought to us time travel. He brought to us biological experimentation and tinkering around with evolution. And he brought to us aliens. So by right, he's one of the major founding fathers of science fiction. Those were called scientific romances at the time. So in 1913, Wells goes on a vacation in the summer of 1913 to Switzerland. And as he does, he keeps up with the science, technology, innovation, engineering of his times, and he takes a book for the ride. Which book did he take? The Interpretation of Radium by Frederick Soddy. And that book inspired him immensely. And, unsurprisingly, a new H.G. Wells novel comes out. On the first few months of January of 1914, The World Set Free is published. The World Set Free tells of a catastrophic war, a war that will engulf the entire planet. It will involve and be participated by all nations and all armies. Now, that nightmare of a world war was in the minds of many back in 1913, 1914. But the specific nightmare H.G. Wells envisioned was his and his alone. Wells wrote this dedication to Soddy and the Interpretation of Radium at the beginning of his book. He also mentions Soddy and a few of his colleagues in the plot of the book. In The World Set Free, Wells tells us of a new, powerful, and horrific weapon, a weapon of mass destruction. It's capable of decimating entire cities. It is used worldwide by all armies, and it ends up completely annihilating civilization as we know it at the end of the war. This new and awesome weapon is based on the new sciences of the times, and specifically inspired by Frederick Soddy's The Interpretation of Radium, tells of bombs that in a very, very small amount of matter hold a vast amount of energy. Now let me tell you 4 characteristics Wells gave his new bomb. 1, these bombs are made of synthetic elements. Elements made in a lab, elements that do not exist in nature. 2, these bombs are different than any conceived weapon prior. They use continual explosions, explosions that feed upon themselves and by that decimate entire cities. 3, they're dropped on a city by an airplane. That's a very, very innovative notion at the time. And 4, and last but not least, they're so small they can be carried in a suitcase. Let me give you a short paragraph from the book. Destruction was becoming so facile, so simple, so easy, that any little body of malcontents could use it. Before the last war began, it was a matter of common knowledge that a man could carry about in a handbag an amount of latent energy sufficient to wreck half a city. Now, how are these bombs called? Once again, I'll let the book tell you in its own words. Nothing could have been more obvious to the people of the earlier 20th century than the rapidity with which war was becoming impossible. They did not see it until the atomic bombs burst in their fumbling hands. These are more recent covers for H.G. Wells' The World Set Free. Obviously, I could not have shown this to you earlier. It would have spoiled the surprise. I want to go back for a second to Frederick Soddy, who inspired The World Set Free. In the 1910s and the 1920s, he became very talkative about the dangers of the new sciences and the responsibility scientists have to their research. In a 1926 book, not a science book, but a policy and economics book, he acknowledges H.G. Wells as an important thinker and a harbinger that must be listened to. And he specifically mentions The World Set Free and the atomic bombs imagined there. And now, the fourth and final player in our chain reaction of ideas enters Leo Szilard, a Jewish Hungarian scientist. He got his diploma right here in Berlin under such people as Max Planck and Albert Einstein again. Einstein and he became partners. Einstein very much appreciated his dissertation, and they worked for a while on creating a refrigerator together. Why am I telling you this? Because he knows Einstein well and they're partners and colleagues. Szilard becomes a prominent scientist and inventor in the late 1920s and the early 1930s, and we catch up to him in London in 1933. In London, he happened to read an interview with a prominent scientist of the time, one of Frederick Soddy's colleagues to his research in radioactivity 30 years prior, in 1903. And this elderly scientist remarks on radioactivity, and he says that while it's very interesting scientifically because it holds information on the basic building blocks of the universe, it would have no practical use whatsoever. And he especially mentions the use of the production of energy. And this really angers Szilard. And for me, this immediately comes to mind, evokes Arthur C. Clarke's first law. Now, this is a segue, but it's an important one. You probably know Asimov's 3 laws, and you're going to correct me and say that there are 4. Prominent science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke also has a 3-rule, 3-law system, and it's about the nexus of science and imagination, science fiction. Arthur C. Clarke's first law is that when a distinguished but elderly scientist states that something is possible, he's almost certainly right. When he states that something is impossible, he's very probably wrong. Leo Szilard was quoted as saying something similar. Pronouncement of experts to the effect that something cannot be done has always irritated me. Now, Szilard, angry, anxious, wants to take some of the stress off. He goes for a walk. That's what he does. And he strolls the streets of London. He walks by the British Museum. He walks off to Russell Square. And a book creeps to his mind. A book he had read not long ago. A book about a horrific world war. A world war that employed atomic bombs. Bombs that utilize a continual explosion. Waiting on a traffic light in Southampton Row in London, in Leo Szilard's mind, the continually exploding atomic bombs became the nuclear chain reaction. That happened on September 12, 1933. Szilard was an inventor, and he patented the idea. The nuclear reactor is Szilard's patent, or was for a time in the 1930s. He continues his research into it, specifically its industrial viability. Other scientists join him. In 1938, he moves to America. He and others, his colleagues, when they're sufficiently convinced about the practicality of it and its dangers, they start lobbying and pleading American officials to look into this, both from US military and the US government. And they get nowhere. No one listens to them. As a last resort, Szilard turns to a trusted old mentor and friend. Szilard and two other nuclear physicists visit Albert Einstein in his home in Long Island in July of 1939. They impress upon him the urgency of pleading to the highest authorities in the land the dangers of atomic power. Einstein, the ever-pacifist, tells them that these notions, these ideas, had never crossed his mind. He agrees to give his name to a letter and his weight to the letter in order for it to be delivered personally to FDR. The Einstein Letter to FDR was conceived, strategized, and written by Leo Szilard, and it's known as the Einstein-Szilard Letter. Now, there are numerous stories about the interrelationship of science and science fiction. For me, this is a very profound one, a remarkable story. Science fiction inspired by science, and in turn inspires the next generation of research and engineering. Now, there are, as I said, numerous such examples. The exploration of space and landing on the moon. Robotics. I'm sure most of you know that the word robot and the word robotics originate in science fiction. And how about augmenting human capabilities, human perception, redefining disability, redefining beauty, redefining humanity itself? As I said, the examples are numerous. This relationship, this very, very important relationship, has two roles. One is inspirational, imagining the future, and by that, creating the future. And two, even more important in my respects, a social role, preparing as society and as individuals to the coming future. Equal amounts of innovation and ethics, if you will. Now, a little bit about innovation. Science fiction is a breeding ground for innovation. And it's a breeding ground for innovation because science fiction creators, authors, filmmakers, video game artists, designers, etc., they're free to imagine. They don't have a market. They don't have investors or boards or employees or customers. All they have is their imagination. And they have one true and important cord that tethers them to reality. And that's their adherence to scientific and technological ideas. What they imagine must emanate from the science and technology of their times. What science fiction authors and filmmakers do is explore the impossible. They name things that do not have names yet. Names of things like robot. Names of things like atomic bomb. What they also do is name ideas like Big Brother. And with Big Brother in mind, it's highly important to remember the science fiction's second role, its social role, helping us prepare for a future and sometimes trying to avoid certain futures. It's indeed, science fiction has indeed inspired our exploration of space and of cyberspace. It's imagined the robot and the clone and the cyborg and our eventual evolution towards the technological singularity, all science fiction concepts. But those wonders are mere byproducts. Science fiction is an art form. It's storytelling. It's not futurism. It can be highly technical and employ innovative technologies and even predictive. But science fiction has always been and will always be about people. Communities, governments, corporations, individuals, their complex relationships, how we transform, evolve, mutate through science, and how we use and abuse technology. In our world, there's extreme importance for texts discussing science, technology, society, and our perspective on the future, doing so intelligently, respectfully, critically, and creatively. To sum up, here are the 4 major points I'd like you to remember and pass on as ambassadors. 1, science fiction is a laboratory for innovative and visionary big ideas. It has an intricate, profound relationship with science and technology. They're meshed together, inseparable. This relationship has 2 major roles. One is inspirational, exploring the impossibilities of today, and by that, creating the possibilities of tomorrow. And we can see that in robotics, cybernetics, atomics, genetics, space. And the more important role in my respects is social, examining how we use and abuse technology and enabling us to better understand and cope with the tomorrow. I'll leave you with 2 quotes from people who express this better than I could ever. One is by Frederick Paul, a science fiction author and editor. A good science fiction story should be able to predict not the automobile, but the traffic jam. Not the technology itself, but how it will be used, abused, and how will society react to it and interact with it. And the second one is Arthur C. Clarke's second law. The only way of finding the limits of the possible is by going beyond them into the impossible. And as 2015 approaches, here's a science tech design impossibility of our times, and I hope someone here is on the job. Thank you, live long and prosper, may the force be with you. I'm going to show a short film, a science fiction film called Cost of Living by the wonderful Jonathan Joffe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Uri. We have some time left for some questions.
I was going to show a film.
Ah, okay.
Okay?
Okay. Sorry for that.
Okay.
Is aircraft aluminum with titanium reinforcements at the joints. Now, a full sport model would be entirely titanium, but in reality, 90% of breaks happen in and around the joints. So, by limiting titanium to the joints,
Can you hear it?
we give you 90% of the structural integrity of the full sport model, but for about half the cost.
Oh, come on.
I don't really play a lot of sports.
Oh. And the skeleton is aircraft aluminum with titanium reinforcements at the joints. Now, a full sport model would be entirely titanium, but in reality, 90% of breaks happen in and around the joints. So, by limiting titanium to the joints, we give you 90% of the structural integrity of the full sport model, but for about half the cost.
I don't really play a lot of sports.
It's a short film.
Sure. Let me show you the Warrior series. The Centurion and the Valkyrie. Centurion also available in full range of Asian and European styling packages. Now, price-wise, the Warriors are a mid-range series, but at ARC we offer the full range of luxury styling options at the mid-range price. Customizable size, body type, as well as over 16,000 choices of skin, hair, and eye tones. And before I go into the various models, what's your first impression? Can you see yourself in a Warrior series?
The dice. I just think it's more than I need.
Okay. Let me ask you this then. What would you consider to be your biggest factor in choosing a new body? Style? Affordability? Reliability?
Affordability.
Well, sure. Price is always important.
I don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, who does, huh? Look, If affordability is your criteria, you've come to the right place. And we may not be as high-tech as some of our German rivals, but we cost a whole lot less. Now, we've been looking at the Warrior series, a mid-range series. It's a good deal, but for the best price, we should look at the M series, the Marathon series. Now, the M's are American Robotic Corporation's entry-level models. Simple, affordable, but as the name implies, they're built to go the distance.
And I hear these start under 6.
We've done some homework. Yes, our most affordable models are the Adam and Eve. They start at 5.95. Is that where you'd like to look?
Price really is the biggest issue.
Well, of course, yeah, not a problem. We'll go right to the Adam. Or Eve.
No. Nothing like that.
Sure, I wasn't trying to imply anything we're supposed to ask. Okay, so this is the Atom. Now, this may be affordable, but it's not cheaply made. It has a steel skeleton. Again, the standard Zycon optics, true view, true touch, sensory input and processing. And it has a 1.5 strength ratio.
And this is the model that's 5.95?
Yes, plus taxes.
Are there any options that I could choose not to take to bring the price down any?
Well, this is the base model.
Are there any older models? Something on sale?
Well, no, at 5.95, the Atom is really the lowest costing synthetic body on the market. Look, may I recommend that we pull up your financial records? We can take a look at what you have, and then we'll see what we can do for you. How does that sound?
I don't want to commit to anything. I've seen the newspapers. I heard stories.
No, I understand. We're just going to look and discuss your options. I'm not going to commit you to anything. Any decision is yours to make, and you can take all the time you want to make that decision. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, I need you to say your full name and SIT number.
Mark Mortensen, 10-31-1979-719-53175.
And the thumb. Okay. Now, are you sure you're going to be able to afford the 10% down payment? It looks a bit close.
I have a coin collection. It's worth about 100,000.
Okay, well, that certainly would get you through the 10%. Anything else? A property, a car, anything else that's not listed here?
No, just the coin collection.
Any relatives who would co-sign? Okay, the 10% is important, but you're also going to have to be able to make the monthly payments too. As it sits, your monthly income is well under the monthly payments, even at the maximum 25-year term.
Well, I'm prepared to get a second job.
Well, that's good, but I can't put you into a financing plan that relies on a job that you don't yet have. And even if you got a second job today, I'd have to see you earning that income, stable for at least half a year. Look, there are other options, but my suggestion to you is to take that second job, earn that income for 12, 16 months, and come back with a higher level of income and a larger initial down payment.
I have cancer.
I see.
I can't wait 12 months. What can I do?
We here at ARC believe that everyone has the right to recorporate, and the company has come up with a number of creative financing solutions. American robotics has a need for a certain number of employees at our various factories, line assembly technicians, custodial staff. There is an opportunity for a certain number of people to purchase an entry-level body and repay the company directly through employment at the factory.
What are the terms?
You work 14-hour days, 6 days a week. After minor deductions for maintenance and taxes, the remaining salary basically equals your monthly payment.
14 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 25 years.
Actually, the term on an employee repayment plan is 100 years.
I thought the maximum term was 25.
In this country, yes. But the factory is in Malaysia. When you agree to an employee repayment plan, you lose your citizenship.
So I would be Malaysian?
No. Technically, under Malaysian law, workers involved in the employee repayment plan are not considered people. But you would gain Malaysian citizenship once your 100-year work term is completed.
So I would be a slave.
We refer to it as the employee repayment plan.
A slave for 100 years.
Mark, we don't use that term in this office. This is the employee repayment plan, understand?
Employee repayment? That's supposed to make me feel better for selling myself into slavery for 100 years?
Look, I didn't make you poor, and I didn't give you cancer. What do you expect me to do here? Give a new $6 million body to everyone who doesn't want to die? A lot of people don't want to die.
Waive your commission. Waive your commission. You do make a commission on this sale, don't you?
I have a family to take care of. I've given you your options. You make your own damn decision.
Decision. I can be a slave, or I can be dead. Where do I sign?
That's it. Thank you. I think we need to wrap things up, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, thank you, Uri, again. Sorry for interruption. It was, some manner of this silent stage, silent disco situation. We have some time left, and we really appreciate if you have comments or questions to Uri. He will have an open ear. So if there are some additions or inspirings to the issue of sci-fi and society. Okay. If it's not the case, thank you, Uri, for this inspiring talk.